Hey, this is Nick the Mining Book Guy. It is the afternoon of December 18th, 2018. You can see that I've got Mod Resources up here, which is MOD on the ASX, and newly listed in London, MOD on the London Stock Exchange. That's an important part of this video. Before I break down the components, I think it's important for people new to my channel realize that I made my first mod video back in March of 2017, so that was a little while ago. I'm not going to regurgitate a lot of things in here, but it happens to be my most popular video ever, and I would personally say it's probably one of my best. It's going to be hard for me to live up to with this video because I already know that I've jam-packed this with information, but consider checking that out if you haven't, or even if you have, it's a good thing to review because surprisingly, a lot of that information is still relevant today. But this video is really about a lot of links. I'll get back to that in a second, but the reason I got excited about making a video was that I attended the London one-to-one conference last month, had a great time. Of the 16 companies I met with, Mod was my best meeting. Unfortunately, Julian wasn't at my particular meeting, but Mark Clements, Steph Weber, and Jacques van Rensburg were there, all in different parts of the company, and we had a great 30-minute chat. I can't say that I learned anything you couldn't necessarily find online, but you do get a sense when you meet people whether they've got a good handle on strategy. That to me was so important. I really feel the strategy is coming together, and at the same time, very important decisions need to be made in the next 3 to 6 months. So that's a core focus of this video, and talking about the difference between the district scale potential on one hand and the T3 development project and how they might fit together, but also that London dual listing, which happened around the same time, as well as Metal Tiger and some of the other partners. I'm going to sprinkle all of that through and also address some questions that other retail investors have had. So bear with me, but keep in mind, if you don't want to watch this whole video, all the links to this video are below this YouTube, and you can pick and choose. But I'm going to do my best to make it interesting and to try to tie things together, even though it will be a little overwhelming. So bear with me. But to start, some fun stuff is that I think Mod is doing a good job of improving their communication and their presentation. There's still some hurdles to get over, and I'll actually touch on a couple areas I think that could be improved on. But I like the Twitter account. This is the official account, and there's these types of images are great as part of the news releases. I just think they're doing a good job of starting to get out there. So consider subscribing to the Twitter account immediately. Also consider checking out the Mod video gallery with some really good videos. We'll touch on a few of those. And even the YouTube channel, which some of the videos are different, and I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. This particular video is the best long-form one, I think, the Diggers and Dealers, where Julian presents at that conference. I should point out, without going into detail, around 22 minutes in, there was some very good Q&A with some good points about Botswana specifically. So that's for people who want to dig a little deeper, consider checking this video out, and especially the end of it. But this video just happened to come out last night. This was from the one-to-one conference. I didn't see this presentation because when you're attending, it's hard to attend a lot of the presentations when you're actually mostly doing one-to-one meetings. So you're on the same level as I am because this is new to me, but I've already picked out two bite-sized parts for you. This first one is just under 20 seconds, and then I'll get into another one shortly after. Take a listen.
We're targeting 30,000 tonne copper a year. Our internal goal really is to double that because we have our sights firmly set on becoming a mid-cap company, and that's part of the reason we've also listed in London to really open up this potential of this region to a much wider market.
So that actually surprised me. It didn't really come up in my presentation with, or my meeting with the rest of the management team, but I know it's on the table that Mod not only could become a successful mid-tier, but they're looking potentially to go from 30,000 tons a year to 60,000 tons, which is no small feat. I'll talk a little more about what that might mean, and it'll be sprinkled throughout the rest of the presentation, but that is interesting as one part of what's going on. And about 7 minutes, 45 seconds in, this will be about, listen for 30, 40 seconds here.
exploration, this is really what sets us apart from the rest. Of the T3 project area is a dark green shape. It shows just simply one farm block, 25 square kilometres there, which is we purchased, and that will become our mining licence. The pale green, just to demonstrate the expansion project, is itself 950 square kilometres. It's all about scale here, and we're looking for sediment-hosted deposits that tend to run. And the yellow is an area that we've just started exploration drilling into, and our shareholders are very focused on what comes out, because that within that area alone we have a soil anomaly that runs for something like 60 kilometres, and it's never been drilled.
That was a great segment, and I'm glad I didn't make this video until the one-to-one video came out. I love that image. I think more of this type of color coding is very valuable. If there's one key takeaway beyond just all the links, it's separating the T3 project from which is where the resources, where the current production profile and the DFS is going to be. The T3 expansion project, which is potentially going to add more to this area, but then the T20 exploration project. Gosh, even when I try to explain it to you, it's still a little confusing with me, but try to keep those three separated, and the color coding helps. We're going to keep trying to go over that throughout this video. So I do have something that, I hope this doesn't confuse people too much, but when Julian talked about 30 to 60,000, or doubling that to 60,000 tons per year, it made me think of this great slide that came from Benjamin J. Cox, who's actually a very well respected copper, person in industry. I believe works for Autotech now, but has worked in a variety of areas as a specialist in copper, and contributes to CEO.ca, not as much lately, but I love this slide from back in 2014 when he presented at SME. This is a valuable slide. I've never seen anything anywhere else like this. I just want to point out that these are all potential acquirers in the copper and the base metal space, and there really is this gap between Tier 1 and Tier 2. This was a post that I made, and there's some other, again, link will be below. But what MOD potentially will do, and what's important, is that they're already at about this 30,000 ton per year production, which is very interesting to these smaller mid-tiers. But once you start looking at the bigger, the Tier 1 type companies, there's this big gap. It's like, a lot of Tier 2 stuff's down here, and the Tier 1 is over here, and there's some companies that are in the middle. But even going from 30,000 to 40,000 to 50,000 to 60,000 tons, every incremental increase really opens it up to more potential players. So if MOD goes alone to some capacity, there's going to be these mid-tiers that are interested. And beyond the ones that you see listed here, I think Sandfire is a good example, and Lundin is another good example. But in the back of my mind, MOD still has a chance to become of interest to these bigger ones, but it's going to require a lot more discovery and some other things that we're going to talk about. So I just think this is valuable to think about, and think about who would be interested in MOD. And I'm not going to touch on it through much of the rest of the video, but the metallurgy is excellent for the current deposit, and that's what makes MOD really stand out as a solid Tier 2 case at the moment. But in terms of the most important video segment, this is the longest segment, so it's going to be 2 minutes. It's the most important. Listen here unless you want to skip ahead, but I recommend listening.
Meanwhile, you're doing so well with your hit rate.
I think the breakthrough here has really been the electromagnetics. There's nothing to compare with it. There's no outcrop, there's no prior drilling. The soil response on the surface is fairly muted. So we found this wonderful geophysical technique not only defines domes, it tells us the internal structure of those domes. So the geologists are now learning very, very quickly where to target within these large domes to hit copper. And I think they've made a major breakthrough in this A4 dome, which we hope will become a template for drilling other domes.
Talk about two deposits, and at a deeper level in particular. What's the significance of the deeper level?
Below the T3 mine project and at the A4 dome, we've discovered a geological contact
which we know to be mineralized throughout the eastern part of the copper belt east of MOD's licenses and hosting around about 7 million tonnes of copper, mainly in 2% copper deposits, sheet-like style of mineralization. We found that below the both T3 dome and also the A4 dome, and we're very encouraged by some of the intersections. We announced a couple of days ago there a 30-metre intersection of fairly substantial copper mineralization in this deeper horizon that we call the NPF contact.
So the fact that there's quite a substantial amount means that the mining doesn't appear as quite as expensive then?
Well, we have the trade-off there between width and grade, but we have some substantial widths here in the NPF contact mineralization. So while our prime contact within the domes is these high-grade vein systems like T3, like we're seeing at A4, we also have this bonus almost thrown in for good measure, sitting below those deposits. And we think that in itself is a very valid and important target.
Just summarize and finally.
So that was a lot to take in for 2 minutes, but I'm telling you, that was the most important technical piece of this entire presentation, and I'm really glad this video exists. By the way, it's a 5-minute video. I think this is one of the most valuable videos that Mod has. So consider watching this segment again, watch the whole video again. But when I was at my one-to-one meeting, I felt like I got very similar information from Jacques, and I really appreciated it. And it's something I'm going to try to express in layman terms a bit right now, but hopefully some of this gets through, especially if that segment on its own seemed a little over your head, because it did seem a little over my head the first time I listened to it. Now, we're going to tie this into some of the news releases. That video was related to this new discovery at A4, and this was a fantastic hole, 52 meters at 1.5% copper, but that hole was extended. It's this hole, and even though there was this wider intersection, there was a shorter intersection of 5 meters at 2.2% copper and some silver much deeper, and that was the NPF contact. That was so important because, and I should go back here, even though it was on this light green area and the immediate thinking was, oh, well, great, this discovery seems like it could be another T3 and it's close enough to T3 and it could be a satellite deposit, it also immediately validated the airborne EM, which is showing all these dome-like structures popping up, not just here, but all the way over here. But that NPF contact, that the image, that second image that you saw in the 2-minute video, it showed flat line going. And in fact, I think I'll just go back to it real quick. Yeah, this whole thing here. There's Cooper Canyon's next door. And they've got this huge project, and I'm not going to dwell on that, but that could be the same structure, geological thing that goes all the way across. So that, I think that's part of the difficulty for, retail or laymen or people like me to understand, is that Cooper Canyon's over here, and that NPF contact, is starting to get interesting over here. And that is actually a key part of the exploration over here. So, what is better? Is it better to add more tons of copper right here and kind of leading from that 30,000 tons to 40,000 tons, maybe to 60,000 tons? Or is it better to, try to prove up that the NPF contact goes all the way through here, which I think is a valid model. I think that is a big part of the exploration over here, but also trying to find more T3s, more A4s, more, maybe something even better on this part of the belt. And this is huge. You got to understand, it's like a tens and tens or 100 kilometers across. This is a whole copper belt. So it's like you've got these small opportunities. It's already really interesting, but then you've got the really big thing, and all of that was actually described in that 2-minute video. But it's taken me a while to pick up on, and hopefully this explanation is leading you in that same direction. Now, even though this NPF contact is deeper, this is just from me talking to a few people. I really think if we start seeing 4 or 5 meters of 2% copper, and you start seeing it all the way across the belt, even though that's a fairly narrow intersection, that's still very positive. And maybe it's a little better if the MPF contact's shallower in other parts, and it very well could be, maybe 400 meters, 300 meters. But even at this depth, if you start proving that up, I think that is the real big prize. So something to keep in mind for what to look out for. But when A4 discovery happened, this is just from Yahoo, it was trading about 44, 45 cents. It popped up to 50, but then it came back down, a month later. I thought it was a real breakthrough, and I started buying more. The first shares I bought for a long time, but clearly within a month, it just started descending further and further. So that was an initial opportunity to me. Now, then we get into November 21st, and this happened right around the same time as the London 1-to-1. So I got very excited because, again, going back here, this was the first drill holes in the yellow area, T23 area. And so that's exciting that they hit copper. Now, I think a lot of people were very upset with the initial assay result here. And this is something where maybe it's a combination of us as investors honestly being spoiled, because the fact that they hit copper in the first hole is a really big deal. I think the model is continuing to be validated, but there's almost this expectation that it should be economic right away, even though they said visible copper intersections. But it did say disseminated. It didn't say vein hosted. And this doesn't really give you the indication that it's going to be economic. But I personally was very excited when I saw this. Now, the follow-on news release in December showed that the first hole was 25 meters at 0.36% copper and then some narrow intersections. People were very disgusted on hot copper. And that's another reason I wanted to make this video. That actually happened right here. Now, prior to the assays, I was buying more shares at 35 and 36 cents and was very happy about it. But then it got hit down here, within a day. Went down like 15 or 20%. I bought more shares here, and honestly, I have a bid in a little lower over here. But this is in terms of a real investor speculator, that's what makes me really excited here, because there's lots of copper plays that have moved down, but there aren't that many copper plays out there. Maybe this is the only one that's making potentially a breakthrough discovery here. And I just think, like investors don't understand the significance, especially the retail guys. But and this is where I'm talking to the company here. More work could be done to give a clearer a clear indication of what this possibly means. And even this is a pre-assay drill hole. Looking at that compared to this, I think there's might be better ways to go about it. And even the fact that this second news release, I was surprised it didn't even mention that the second hole assays are still coming. So there's some stuff I really like in the news release, but I'm hoping some of that communication can be improved. And I'm going to touch on the communication a little later as well. But at the same time, gosh, it really looks like there's something interesting here. You've got this combination of soil anomalies and the airborne EM, and I think they're really onto something, and there's no reason for the stock price to move down like 20% because the first hit wasn't economic. I think that's absurd, but I don't have time to whine about that because I've got a lot of other things to go through in this video. Again, think about the scale here and how they really could be on to some serious discoveries, whether it's another type of T3 or hitting NPF contact that is shallower and that literally goes across the belt. We're potentially on the cusp of that. Now, on a little bit of a different note, I need to kind of tie in the share structure, Metal Tiger, and the dual listing, because I think a lot of people don't understand, why this dual listing came in. Now, before getting into the dual listing, this is from the PowerPoint. I think the company should present this a little differently. There's a lot of options here, but a big portion of these options, and I can find the exact amount actually. Where was it? Was it on this? Oh, maybe I moved. Pardon my delay here. Oh, I think I was looking at the wrong point. So you can find this in a few different places, but 40.7 million options were issued to Metal Tiger with a 0 exercise price. They can't be exercised immediately because of some kind of complicated aspects here. But I think as an investor, you should include that in the valuation of the company. So without trying to be too confusing, the current market cap is actually at a 0.27 Australian dollar or Aussie cents share price. It's that this number is actually about the same when you include those options in the issued capital. So they can't be exercised immediately, but I'm sure they will be by Metal Tiger based on that semi-complicated deal. So at 27 cents, I would say the fully diluted market cap is actually very close to 80 million Australian dollars right now. I hope the company presents that a little clearer, because I think it's an important point that Metal Tiger has a lot of these options. But at the same time, this mod now owns 100% of the TT project. It's basically, despite the complications here, it's streamlined it for a financing or for getting funding from larger institutions, or I think getting potentially new partners into the project. So that was a very important ordeal that Mod is now done with. There is a video, again, link below, that I'm not going to show you a clip on, but this has some good details about that listing. But I am just going to read a quick paragraph. The dual listing aims to enhance the international profile of Mod and improve access to UK and European institutional investors during this period of rapid activity and growth for the company. There are very few copper developers and producers on the LSE, and this listing provides an opportunity for Mod to be exposed to a far broader investment market at a time of rising copper demand and falling inventories. There's a lot to say here, but I am convinced that this was a good move to list on the LSE because of the lack of large or potentially large copper, let alone gold companies in Africa. And it's actually more interesting because Randgold just got bought out by Barrick Gold, and I think their listing will be removed from the LSE. And so it's an opportunity to get investment from these London or European-based funds. Many of the London funds will not or cannot invest on the ASX. And I think I thought this was a little strange a year ago. I was like, why didn't Mod list on the TSX? I'm 100% convinced that London was the better listing. Now, there's one other thing to add here. I made this post, which I think it fits in quite well. Naguib Sawiris has funded and is the largest shareholder of many African-focused companies. One of them is Endeavour Mining. And in an interview, he said they might pursue a dual listing on the London Stock Exchange, currently only listed in Canada. And then Resolute Gold, this was not too long ago, also said, even more confirmed, they're going to list on the LSE. There's definitely this trend of African gold or copper, whatever companies listing on the LSE because London is open for business for, exciting African plays. That is not true in North America. So I say kudos to Mod for focusing more on Europe and Asia. It's very different from a lot of other companies, but based on being in Botswana, to have interest from London, interest from South Africa, interest from Singapore, interest from Australia, that's the part of the world they're taking advantage of. Unfortunately, there is a big negative right now. This is kind of sad to me because these are the actual trades on the LSE. This site shows them. And you can see, December, basically going from November to December, this is it. So I'm very disappointed. Now I know that you're not expecting that many trades, especially because there wasn't a funding. But I was really hoping that things would be set up so that this would be a liquid listing. It's currently not that liquid. And maybe it was smart to get this listing done so that when a financing does occur, they don't have to go through this process. But I was really, I'm a little confused about this. I didn't specifically ask the company, or confirm whether they expected there to be a lot of buying on the market. But it's weird to have a listing and to have barely anyone trading your stock. Thankfully, the ASX is fairly liquid, and I'm I'm happy that, if a new discovery is made, I think the ASX will trade, but it's possible that they're going to have to wait till a funding happens on the LSE for it to trade. I think the worst thing would be that funds literally only want to buy into the placement. So I don't know what can be done, but hopefully over time, we will see more liquidity on the LSE listing. It's just something I am not sure how to address at the moment. But this leads into the strategy over the next 3 to 6 months. Again, back to our favorite image. Best case scenario is a spectacular discovery happens here. And that's what I'm hoping for as a shareholder. And I think it's more realistic than people give it credit for. That could be big buying immediately. And maybe there would be a lot of LSE buying. I'd be perfectly happy if that's what it took for the LSE buying to happen along with the ASX buying. And, we get back up to 50 plus Australian cents or the London equivalent. And they move forward with the financing in March or April and everyone's happy. But that's really the best case scenario. I think a middle of the road case, it's important to think about creative types of financings or partnerships. And I'm sure that Mod has been thinking about this. In fact, talking to Mark, it was very useful for to get the realization that these guys have been deep thinkers about strategy. And I'm sure Julian would have had something to say as well. But it is this, there's always looming in the background the possibility of having some corporate come in, or some private equity. There's all sorts of different players. I wanted to point out, and I had a good advice of using this as an example from someone. Gold Road Resources had this creative JV with Goldfields back in November 2016. Links below. But you look, it was a district scale land package with this very big gold asset, and you can see that the main JV was around the deposit in a smaller other area, and then there was an additional part of the JV in one part, and then the whole other parts of the map remained 100% owned by Gold Road, with Goldfields as the partner on some of it. There's kind of a resemblance in terms of district scale and breaking up Mod in different ways. So it's very possible the company is already looking at that as a possibility, but I would strongly recommend something of that nature, and maybe it would be more at the project level. I mean, it could be the project level, or it could be at the company level, or a combination. But I think something like that would be very interesting, especially if the stock price stays lower. A straight up strategic investment in the company, that is a possibility as well. And when I'm thinking about financings, they really could be a smaller financing, more for the exploration. So I have to give a shout out to Cash Me Outside, who brought up this point. So you can read this at your own leisure. Again, link will be below, but maybe there will be a financing of something like 10 or 20 million within a month. And it could be something along the lines of what I just described, or something different. But that is maybe not the ideal, but it could totally happen. Now, to me, the worst case scenario is that we sorry, before I get to the worst case scenario, I just read this. The board is considering several strategic options to fund exploration of the unique regional potential across our vast license holdings while we develop the T3 project. So yeah, that's right here. I just wanted to read that to confirm. I know these guys are deep thinkers about strategy, but the worst case scenario is that not only are we at maybe still at 30 cents 3 months from now, but let alone 25 cents or 20 cents Australian, and then we do this huge financing. And I think Julian's on record saying maybe 60% would be for debt. So, if it was a $200 million getting raised and 120 million was in debt, but then like 80 million was in equity, I'm sure that wouldn't happen, but that would be an absolute disaster for shareholders. So I really hope, and I'm sure all the other shareholders hope, that we don't have to do a massively dilutive financing like that. And all the better if there's some type of partner, some type of big name that adds credibility and really gets the price up. Because I think whatever copper name is out there, if you get a bigger name, whether it's a mid-tier or whether it's a major, and even if it's only for exploration side, it really can juice your stock price so that when you eventually do the big financing, your price is higher even in a poor market. But those are just some different scenarios I've been thinking about. And I I know I've gone on pretty long, so I'm going to try to be a little quick at the end here. I wrote something on hot copper, and there were a few questions or comments. This one's from Get Greedy, and he specifically asked. It is certainly not clear whether. Yeah, so I touched on this. I did want to address this in the video, but I think that it was important to move to T20 because even though discovery at A4 is interesting and there could be there absolutely could be other discoveries in this whole light green area. This is what reinforces the district scale potential. And I think there's a possibility that the NPF contact is shallower somewhere along here. So what I'm really hoping is that the company drills as much as possible, and that we get more clarity on how many drill rigs there are, and it'd actually be ideal, in my opinion, if we had a news release every 2 to 4 weeks, even if it was only 3-4 news releases over the next 3 to 4 months, but something like 20 or 30 drill holes could somehow, all the rest, and if it required a small financing to get there, really see if we can make an economic discovery over here, because it would really get the attention of the wider audience out there. I think that A4 should have gotten more attention, but I am convinced that this is the right strategy. And I told all the guys at the meeting this, and Mod has a lot of choices, but that's the best way I can answer that. It's okay if it's not economic, but the main focus should be T20 right now. And then Reese T and all these guys have had good things to say on hot copper. I think that actually, I mean, the question is less important than the comments here. I think this is a really good point. I think A4 is still really important. I am surprised that it's taken a while for some of the A4 assays to come in. It's possible that A4 is not, at least I think the MPF contact is very intriguing, but the A4, the vein hosted section that might look like T3 is actually much smaller. It can still be important feed for a T3 project, even if it's lower grade, even if it's at depth, because the core project, T3 is economic at these levels. And I can't emphasize enough that I'm not sure if it's a high certainty that the metallurgy is going to be good across the project, but T3 works because the metallurgy is excellent, and it should not be underestimated that it probably has for a project that has rough 1 to 1.5% copper, by having excellent metallurgy, and Steph brought up this point, 30 or 35% copper concentrates. That's something that copper smelters really want, and I can't think of any other projects that are at this level that actually could be built by the end of 2020. And it's even amazing that it's only taken us since 2016 to get to this point. But there's a lot to be said for T3 already being very exciting, and the company being undervalued. But I hope that we get clearer reporting on drill results, and I think this is a good point from Reese T. I can't spend too much time on Metal Tiger, but this was a nice video. Again, link below, and I know the Metal Tiger people really know this, but Michael McNeely, who runs Metal Tiger, and Terry Graham are one of the largest shareholders and well-respected geologists, had some good things to say in this video. And I just want to get the point across that I think Metal Tiger is a great way to get exposure here. And of course, for people who are based in the UK, it's easiest to buy Metal Tiger. But from this video and the strategy that I know, it's clear to me that Metal Tiger is more focused on earlier exploration opportunities, which in some ways might be better. It's a different risk profile. It's more diversified across different companies and different opportunities. To their credit, they got a big part of the value creation. Metal Tiger was the small, I think, 100,000 pound investment that was led by Terry Grammer into what turned into the T3 discovery. So I think their goal is to try to replicate this, and they have a lot of value in what's happened between the Mod and MTR JV. But with that said, Mod is more of a pure play and seems, has that potential to become a mid-tier, and it's very possible Metal Tiger might sell down its investment over time. It's not an us versus them. I think that this new agreement where Mod now owns 100%, it's great if that's what leads to the larger institutional funding. And that's where I think the LSE listing is validated, because a lot of that funding will come in that way. And it's actually nice that, if that becomes more liquid, if you're UK based or European based and you prefer buying in London, you can own some of Mod and Metal Tiger. And there'll be a little more on that at the end of this video. But also, I do think it's really interesting that Metal Tiger has an early investment and holding in Kalahari Metals, which I believe is going to go public. And so this is interesting in its own right. They picked up land on the other side of Cooper Canyon. So Mod is down here, and I'll have another image to show you in a second, and they're up here. But who knows, that they may end up making some discoveries. And then there's this other company called Kapoor Metals, which is listed as KMT on the ASX. And interestingly, they have a different side. Now, I do have to make an important point that I think much of this Botswana land used to be owned by Mod, and they let it go. So there could still be legitimate discoveries, but Mod was here early on, and they probably kept what they felt was best. But I think this Namibia side, assuming they can get that going, that's the continuation of the trend here. So that was kind of new to me. But the fact that Kapoor and Kalahari along Metal Tiger have kind of filled in all the gaps, that shows that there's a real district, being created. And you could play these smaller companies, but I personally think that Mod is the real deal, and that's the best way to play this area. But you should keep in mind all the other players here, and we'll see if this gets more attention from larger players, where then a lot more people pay attention when they see big names potentially attached to Mod, or picking up ground in other parts. Though I think all the best grounds have been taken at this point. I had a couple things to finish up on. This was from my YouTube video, the other video, and someone mentioned Brent Cook's life cycle. I could spend a whole time just talking about this. So Brent Cook and actually Pierre Lassonde talked about this exploration curve, which is very well known in the industry. What's happened with Mod is it's gone from this earlier stage excitement to people thinking of it more being in the orphan period. That happens to a lot of companies. But a great example of the last few years, I think, is West African, which is dual listed as WAF in the TSX and in Australia. So a lot of you might have heard of it. And to their credit, they went from a marginal, small-scale project to exciting exploration. And this was high-grade gold veins beneath their project. And between 2016 and 2018, or 2017, it was very exciting. So the key is that it's another African project that kind of went from mining back to the exploration side. People thought of it more as an exploration play. But lately, especially because they got funding, they're kind of back in this area. But they also show that people are interested in Africa, because they got like $250 million funding to fully finance the project. So it is important, perception-wise, to not get stuck in this orphan period if you have the exploration potential. And so, that gets back to why right now, over the next 3 or 4 months, I really hope Mod can make something happen here. But even if they can't, even if they have to, they do some large financing and maybe a creative financing, and people start thinking more, and right now they are thinking more about the development project T3, companies should always keep in mind, how can you get the perception back to that exciting exploration? And I think there's a lot of ways that Mod can go about it. And West African is an example of a success story, at least of kind of going back and forth between the two. And a couple of final shout-outs. I mentioned Chris J Parrish in my last video, and I have to mention again because he helped me a bit. I reached out to him before this video for some things, and really gave me some good pointers. And I actually really like this pinned tweet. So this is just a cool thing to check out. I totally buy into the basic analogy here, and hopefully this kind of comes true, but we'll see about that. And something fun to end with. So a lot of you guys know Rick Rule. I know a lot of people are aware of this, but I also know a lot of people, especially in North America, aren't aware of this. And here, let me play it for you, and I'll make a final comment
on the losses. Give me one or two names that you are buying or plan on buying, and what price?
There's only one I'm actively buying right now. Well, there's two companies and one deposit. I'm actively buying Metal Tiger and Mod Resources, who have what I see as potentially a spectacular discovery.
We're talking producers right now.
Not buying it.
Okay, so this is funny on two accounts. One, Marin Katusa, and this was a conference he sponsors in San Francisco about a month ago. He cut Rick off, but I think rightly so, because Marin wanted Rick to respond with producers. But the fact that Marin asked about producers and Rick Rule, the first thing that came to mind was talking about Mod and Metal Tiger, tells you a lot about how much he likes those deposits. And I've mentioned this to people before. I'm a Sprott client. The important part of the idea was generated through Sprott. And then, I get a lot of ideas through my brokerage, but this was one of my favorites, especially when I did my own research. But it's so important to realize that Rick and Sprott, Sprott Global specifically, kind of in San Diego, are like the only people in North America who seem to care about Mod. So if Mod really is on, and Metal Tiger for that matter, are on to a legitimate discovery here in Botswana, oh man, there's going to be so many people piling in because the North Americans just don't know about it, and they will buy on the ASX and the LSE. But I think it's so underfollowed, and I just love it that Rick, said this at a conference. So without it even being the appropriate answer, and this might be eye-opening to some of you that didn't know about the story, but everything about Rick Rule and didn't realize this is Mod and Metal Tiger are some of his favorite plays, and this is a win-win. You can own Mod, you can own Metal Tiger, and you will make money whether you own either or both of them. This has been long enough. I hope you got some value out of this video. If the only thing you got out of it was understanding the difference between these colors, then good for you. And make sure to check out some of the links. All these links, again, are below the YouTube video. And good luck with your own research. This is Nick, the Mining Book Guy. Thanks so much for watching. Happy holidays. Bye.